I want to make one point about electric vehicles, and it is that they are good for our state. They are creating jobs now. They will create new jobs, and they will create even new industries.
EVs are more powerful, more practical, and more cost-effective than you think. And they're also driving economic growth in Alabama. In these episodes, we're talking to some of the brightest leaders in the industry. And we're covering everything from infrastructure advancements to benefits and incentives for people like you. Hello. Thank you for joining us for the Drive Electric Alabama podcast, where we plug you in to everything you need to know about electric vehicles, also known as EVs, in the state of Alabama. This podcast is brought to you by Alabama Power's You're in Charge EV incentive programs. To learn more about these programs, go to alabamapower.com/EV. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Staley. I'm also president of the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition. To learn more about funding and incentives, let's welcome Houston Smith, VP of Governmental Affairs and chairperson of the Energy Institute of Alabama, or EIA, and Blake Hardwick, executive director of EIA. In this podcast, we may use some acronyms, and we're going to try to clarify them, but you can always look at our show notes to learn more and to get clarification on those long acronyms. Blake and Houston, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yep, excited to be here, Michael. Thanks.
Blake, I know that EIA is pretty new, and a lot of people haven't really heard of exactly what EIA does. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Energy Institute?
Sure. The Energy Institute of Alabama was formed back in 2016 as a nonprofit organization. It's made up of industry leaders who work together to promote the electric industry. We work to educate the public about the importance of the industry to our state. We are basically made up of the 6 electric industries across the state, those being the Alabama Municipal Electric Authority, the Alabama Rural Electric Association, Alabama Power Company, Electric Cities of Alabama, Power South Energy, and the Tennessee Valley Authority. The energy sector is a critical component to manufacturing, and EIA's mission is to advocate for energy policies that will enhance the economy of Alabama and support economic development. As it pertains to the electric vehicle industry, as you know, it's growing quickly, and we want to make sure the electric industry sector in Alabama is prepared to meet the growing needs. And, of course, we're proud to partner and support the Drive Electric Alabama campaign.
So now let's focus for a minute on funding that supports the EV space and the industry that is building and manufacturing and designing EVs. And there's 2 real big perceptions that people have about EVs that's barriers slowing down adoption and transition. And that's that EVs are really expensive and that the charging infrastructure is not in place to reduce that range anxiety. So Houston, I want to go to you and ask, how did Alabama set itself up for success to overcome these challenges?
So, Michael, I think you made an important point when you talked about this being a part of Alabama's economy. I mean, Alabama set itself up for success in this area beginning in 1993 when it recruited Mercedes to this state. You know, since then, you've seen us recruit Hyundai and Honda and Mazda Toyota. And especially with Mercedes, Hyundai, and Honda, you're seeing global commitment to electric vehicles. We talk about innovation often in this state, and you cannot talk about innovation in an industry without talking about the automobile sector. And so it's a gift to the state of Alabama that we have all these auto manufacturers representing somewhere around 80,000 jobs up and downstream. And now we're facing a total revolution in this industry. Specifically, our state has begun taking steps since 2019 when the Rebuild Alabama Infrastructure Bill was passed to help address some of Alabama's crumbling roads and bridges. The state did something that one of the most innovative moves in the country. It created a grant program that puts money from EV license fees back into infrastructure to support electric vehicle expansion. That is a state recognizing the critical value of the automobile industry to this state and its evolving sort of future. The next thing it did in 2020, the state created the Innovation Commission, which led to the Innovation Corporation and Innovate Alabama, which is finding ways to facilitate growth of emerging industries like those industries that support the electric vehicle transition that automobiles are going through. You see entities like Techstars, accelerators that are global accelerators, recruited to Alabama to focus on energy issues like electric vehicles. And it's not just the automakers, because you're seeing companies across the state invest in EV technology and battery research. You're seeing our universities do it. You're seeing Auburn University look at autonomous driving. You're seeing Alabama look at batteries. And you see things like graphite plants coming to rural communities like Coosa County. All of this is to support this global investment by auto manufacturers in the evolving EV landscape. There are other small steps that have happened along the way. You saw the federal government pass the infrastructure bill, which created opportunities for states to use federal funding to build out their electric vehicle infrastructure, as the government recognized globally the investment in electric vehicles. And Alabama has taken some really creative steps to improve what the government funding was going to do. And a lot of that funding is the NEVI funding. And I'm sure, Michael, you have talked about that at some point on these podcasts. But one of the things that our delegation in Alabama did was make sure that NEVI funding could be used on workforce development and training, so that we get this infrastructure here. We also build a workforce to support how do you deploy it, and more importantly, probably how do you maintain it. And then finally, as it relates to the NEVI funding, the NEVI funding is largely focused on highways. And our legislature has recognized that. And we recognize that many parts of Alabama are rural. And if Alabama is going to really make electric vehicles an opportunity for everywhere in every corner of this state, they've got to provide funding for electric vehicle infrastructure in rural communities. So in addition to the Rebuild Infrastructure Grant Program from 2019, the government has directly invested in infrastructure that will serve rural communities off of the major interstate corridors. And so you see the auto industry working on it. Blake mentioned the electric industry is preparing itself to support the expansion and growth of electric vehicles. And then you see our government, the governor, the legislature, fully committed to making sure our state is prepared to support one of the driving forces of our economy.
So what I hear you saying is that Alabama's been open for business as an automobile manufacturer, and our legislature has been supporting this transition even before the federal government. And now the federal government comes in and has additional support. And that's important to our state. That is also important to businesses that are either looking to support their customers or to attract customers that drive EVs.
You're exactly right. Alabama's government realized this was a critical industry and saw the transition coming and invested to take care of Alabama's economy before the federal government started putting money into the support of electric vehicle infrastructure.
That'll keep us competitive going into the future as an auto manufacturing state, and all those jobs are going to the Southeast United States. We've got to compete to get them here in Alabama. Houston, from an Alabama Power perspective, what is the Alabama Power Company doing to prepare for this transition?
We are doing all we can to serve our customers' interest around electric vehicles. That may be residential customers who are trying to use EVs and charge them at their homes. That can be commercial customers. That can be customers with fleets. But we're trying to find ways to make it easy for them to scale their infrastructure. We're trying to form industry partnerships. We're supporting technological innovation around the electric vehicle industry. And we're working to support policy change that makes it better for Alabama as this industry evolves.
So Alabama Power is not putting chargers in the ground and having customers come charge there. You're supporting your customers in the industry and the evolution. Is that right?
Yep. We want to make sure our infrastructure supports any expansion, no matter what our customers need. I want to make a point because there has been a narrative that maybe the grid is not ready, but I will tell you in Alabama, the grid is ready. We get questions at times when storms happen and we share people resources with other states. When we get those questions from our customers, the point we make is we would never send resources to another state if we hadn't fully taken care of our customers' needs. And so we're going to work to make sure that always our customers, the demands of our state are taken care of.
Well, Blake, I want to switch back over to you now. We've talked about NEVI funds and ADECA funds. Can you give us a little insight about the Inflation Reduction Act and what it means for EVs and how it can help consumers and businesses with the infrastructure to support EVs?
Sure. The Inflation Reduction Act, also known as the IRA, was passed at the federal level in 2022. The legislation includes clean energy vehicles, such as what we're talking about today, electric vehicles. Included in that package are different incentives for the electric vehicle space. And so beginning back in January 1 of 2023, consumers who purchased EVs assembled in America, those EV cars could qualify for a tax rebate up to $7,500 on new EVs and up to $4,000 on certified previously owned EVs. These rebates are specific to each consumer, including things such as household income. And there's also a component about the makeup of the batteries that are running the EVs. And there's a mandatory component of a percentage of the battery components to be made in America or within the NAFTA, the North American Trade Agreement. Obviously, that's a lot of information, and to really check out if you qualify for a tax rebate and how much you qualify for, I would recommend to go into the IRS website.
And Blake, I know there's some things in the IRA also that provide tax benefits for businesses that put in charging infrastructure.
You're absolutely correct. And what I failed to mention as far as the consumers, as I said, it began January 1 of 23, and it lasts all the way up through December of 2032. So there's plenty of time to purchase the EV and get your tax rebate at the point of sale.
Going back to you, Houston, for one more thought, the power company does a whole lot to support your customers that are looking at all these federal programs and new grants, because the infrastructure bill created the NEVI program, and the legislature has, a program to fund EV charging at ADECA. But there's a bunch of other federal programs, from ports to school buses and everything in between. And I know there's a lot of interest in those programs. And because of the number of new programs, it's a challenge. Can you speak a little bit about what the Alabama Power Company does to try and help your customers with those type of situations where there's new programs?
Yeah, and when I mentioned a little bit about the different types of customers and our need to support them, that's what I'm talking about. Electric vehicles are so broad. We think automobiles that everybody's driving around on the highways, but really it is all of those things you talk about. And so we're looking at all of our customers and thematically trying to help them solve their problems, whatever they are, as their fleets transition. But we are leveraging every opportunity we can to support customers and their interest in bringing down cost to make their fleets more efficient. We're providing our own programs, rates, like new rates for customers who are transitioning to electric vehicles. We're providing incentives. We're making sure we have programs that make it easier for them to build electric vehicle infrastructure at their facilities. You mentioned specifically the ADECA program earlier, the ADECA Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Grants. And those grants come with a match. And so our company has worked to create dollars to make sure we can help customers fill that match.
So you're actually helping your customers in a way that helps them cover that match, the 20% match on those grants. And then one piece of feedback I can give is that even from the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition, we work with people from electric utilities across the state as we go and talk to school systems about the school bus funding, because they have a lot of questions about the new technology. They've never had EV buses. They've never had electric anything. And so to transition is overwhelming at first. And so to have the ability to go in and share information and then also have those rebate programs like you talked about, the Make Ready program that Alabama Power has, it really can smooth that transition and help them to get to the point of making a decision to get those federal funds to come to our state. The Drive Electric Alabama podcast is brought to you by Alabama Power's Home Charging Rebate Program. You can get a $500 rebate when you purchase and install a Level 2 charger at your home. If you want to know more, check the show notes or go to alabamapower.com/EV. Now, back to the discussion. Blake, you've heard Houston and I talking all about Alabama Power programs, and your organization, EIA, really represents all the electric utilities. So what do you have to say about that if someone's not an Alabama Power customer? What are the other type of things that you're seeing from other utilities across the state, Blake?
Yeah, I see other utilities offering something compatible to what Alabama Power has offered. But if you're listening to this podcast and are not an Alabama Power customer, check with your utility company to see what incentives they might be providing, because most of the ones I've talked to is offering some type of incentive.
Houston, going back to the kind of economic development or research and development, R&D around EVs, can you tell us a little bit more about the AMP Center and what that means for our state?
Yeah, I mentioned some of the work going on at universities across the state. One of those that is really the Alabamians should be proud of is a unique partnership between Alabama Power, Mercedes, and the University of Alabama. It's really a one-of-its-kind program across the country. It's called the AMP Center, Alabama Mobility and Power Center, and the executive director is Mike Oatridge, and he will be on I believe, a later episode. But really, it is doing cutting-edge research to help build out all parts of the electric vehicle ecosystem, which is something that is critical in this state, as we've talked about before. But that's everything from battery research to understanding how this growth trajectory is happening, looking at the numbers in Alabama and elsewhere across the country to see what's driving the growth of EVs, tracking the global investment in automobile manufacturers that are transitioning to electric vehicles, so that this state has a real center of excellence to address the evolving automobile manufacturing ecosystem.
Now it's time for a segment where we separate fact from fiction when it comes to EVs, and it's brought to you by the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition. There's a myth out there that says EVs are not as green as they seem or aren't any greener than gas-powered cars. But the truth is, there are emissions produced while building an EV, just like the ICE engine or internal combustion engine. However, that's where the EV emissions stop, because they have no tailpipe emissions. So by comparison, ICE vehicles produce emissions long after they're built. Those vehicles are as clean as they will ever be on day one, and only get dirtier. The U.S. Department of Energy has a greenhouse gas emissions calculator to help anyone see just how their EV stacks up environmentally. Let's go back to the conversation. Well, so Houston and Blake, it's been really great to have you on the show today. I'd like to just take a few minutes here at the end to wrap up and ask you if you could just please share a few broad takeaways from today's conversation. Blake, can we start with you?
Sure. As I've stated before, the Energy Institute strengthens the electric industry, promoting public policy and creating economic growth for our state. But going back and talking about electric vehicles, a lot of the utility companies, which are EIA members, understand that there are still many questions out there regarding EVs, from range anxiety, maintenance, safety, and of course, purchase price. So again, I encourage you to reach out to your utility and see what opportunities they have as far as incentives if you do decide to go electric. Another thing I just wanted to talk about with the Energy Institute is we're working with public and private organizations to create high-paying jobs in the Alabama energy sector, and that includes electric vehicle components and also the fast-growing industry sector of electric vehicles, where it's a new battery plant or mining opportunities or are automotive dealers that are now selling and making the electric vehicles here in Alabama.
Thank you, Blake. And Houston, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I want to make one point about electric vehicles. and it is that they are good for our state. They are creating jobs now. They will create new jobs, and they will create even new industries. Automobiles, if you've driven one, I've driven a corporate Tesla and observed that it gets software updates and changes the operations of the vehicle overnight at times. And these automobiles are becoming computers on wheels, and they will unlock business opportunities that we cannot imagine today. I would say it's analogous to the iPhone. You could not have Google Maps until iPhones became ubiquitous and everybody's carrying them around in their pockets. So it's good for our state because it will create opportunities for future businesses and future jobs. It's good for customers. There's been discussion about that. And in addition to the work the state is doing, what the federal government is doing to support all parts of our state having infrastructure available, we and the other utilities in our state are working hard to support customers and their interest in making the transition to electric vehicles.
Well, thank you so much, Blake and Houston, for being on the show today. We've learned a lot from you.
Thank you for having us.
In the next episode, we're going to talk about EV charging infrastructure and advancements in Alabama. My co-host Cedric Daniels will be speaking with Drew Fry, electric vehicle manager at Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA. He'll also talk to Justin Harrison, distribution grid transformation and planning manager at Alabama Power. Stay tuned, and we hope to see you then. The Drive Electric Alabama podcast is brought to you by Alabama Power's You're in Charge EV programs, as well as the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition. The series is co-hosted by me, Michael Staley, and Cedric Daniels, and the podcast is produced by Ingredient. For more information, you can always check the show notes or go to alabamapower.com/EV. Thanks for listening.